There are things known and there are things unknown, and in between are the doors of perception. Now, what is perception? What is it and what does it do? What's the point of it? Oftentimes people see perception as just a worldview. And while that is true, that is part of perception, it is a much more complicated process. Perception helps us to interpret the chaos of what we see, hear, touch, etc. There are numerous inputs of information in our experiences. We hear, we smell, we feel, we experience things on a number of levels, more so now than any generation before. That's chaos. And perception helps us to organize that chaos. It is a process that starts with purely selecting information. Selection is a first step in the whole process of perception, which then leads to organization of the information and then subsequently interpretation of the information. So let's look at those three things. What is selection? How does that work? There are two things that come with selection that we need to examine further. Both of these things affect what information we choose to select, if any at all. So as we said, perception allows us to make sense of the chaos. Well, the very first thing to do in order to make sense of chaos is to select what you are going to pay attention to. It is to gather that information first before you can make any decisions about it. So we have to start by attending to certain things. And some of the things that are most prevalent to us in this part of the process are things that are salient. The salience of something is the degree to which a particular people or aspects of their communication attract our attention. So anything that would be out of the ordinary. When is communication salient? It's when a person behaves in a visually or audibly stimulating manner. So maybe it would be something like a loud noise, screaming and yelling. Maybe it would be an outrageous attire, something that is stimulating either auditorily or visually. And then if our goals and our expectations lead us to view the communication exchange as important, we find it to be salient. If you've ever been in a classroom and the teacher has said your name or said, this is on the exam or this is important, all of those things are salient to us because we perceive them to be important. When the exchange deviates from our expectations, we also see that as salient. So when we are communicating with someone and they say or do something that is completely opposite or different from our expectations, then we view that as salient. The salience isn't the only part of it. Selective perception is also prevalent here. Selective perception means that we pay attention to what we are familiar with or what is important to us, and that might be different for different people. You may be sitting in a classroom in psychology or interpersonal communication and hear topics that for you is important. Topic A is important for you, but topic B is important for the person sitting next to you, depending upon the circumstance. For example, in a public speaking class, maybe you have high anxiety about giving a speech, but the person sitting next to you has been in a formal speech competition for their whole high school career. You are going to focus intently on discussions of anxiety reduction and how to give a speech without completely freaking out, whereas the person sitting next to you may focus more on how to deliver more effectively. So tone of voice and posture and gestures and such. It depends on what is most valuable or most important to you. So selective perception and salience are part of the selection process. Now, when you look at this image here, what sticks out first? There are two images. There is the black outline, which is that of a vase, and then you have the two white faces here. So which comments or behaviors occur first in the communication? Which sticks out the most to you? So if you are having a conversation and somebody says, I'm fine, in a unhappy tone, What is going to stick out first? What is the most important thing to you at that moment? Is it the words, I'm fine? Or is it the words, or excuse me, the tone within those words? Which one sticks out the most? So for many of us, that might be the tone. We attend to that, we organize that as the most important piece of information first, and the words come second. So we have ordered it in a certain manner. And when you look at this picture, which one sticks out to you first? For some of you, you've maybe seen this photo before, and so you know what to see right at the get-go. You know that both of them stick out to you. For others, it might be that this background here is sort of pale in tone, so the black vase sticks out most. It depends on what you find as the most intense for you. But the question really isn't what is the most obvious, it's what is the most important for that situation. What are you going to prioritize first as the most important indicator of the situation? And finally, we have interpretation. And interpretation is how we take all of the information that we've selected and we've organized, and then we come to a decision about it. So what can we use to interpret what we see, hear, and touch? Well, for example, we start with something called schemata. And those are expectations that we hold about people, places, events, etc. Oftentimes you hear people talk about stereotyping. That fits in that category. Schemata are schemes, they are scenarios that we create for certain people, places, or things. So, for example, you may believe that going into a dark alleyway in the middle of the night in New York City is not a good idea. Maybe you've never been to New York City before, but you just feel like that is the picture you're going to paint of the situation. That is an expectation you have about that place at that time. And is it a negative thing that you feel that way? Potentially, but it could also be a positive thing and save you some destruction. In addition, it could be on a positive situation. For example, imagine if you were offered tickets to the Super Bowl. Have you ever been to the Super Bowl? Whether you have or not does not deter whether you expect it to be fun. Many of you would say, a Super Bowl, I want to go. That sounds like a blast, even if you've never been before, because you have expectations that you hold about that event. So it is sometimes positive, sometimes negative. It's something that does allow us to make interpretations, but we have to be able to adjust those schemata based on our experiences and our knowledge gained through research and unexpected situations. Another part of it is attributions. These are creating explanations for others' comments or behaviors. So it's your decision making about why people do what they do. Sometimes we attribute behaviors to internal issues, and sometimes we attribute them to external. If we're attributing a behavior to an internal issue, a person's behavior can be explained from your point of view by their personality or their characteristics, just who they are on the inside, internally. So when you say, well, they got that job because they are so smart and so outgoing, that would be attributing their behavior to internal factors. External factors would be when a person's behavior can be explained by outside factors, the environment, the circumstance, other people, and so on. So in that same scenario, you might say that they got that job because they knew the vice president, or they got that job because they had a list of really good letters of recommendation. So these would be external attributions. All of these things end up helping us to determine what we are going to interpret in the circumstance. What are we going to determine is the truth about what we are seeing and experiencing? Sometimes we're accurate, sometimes we're completely wrong. And that's another topic. We want to talk about perceptual influences, and we'll get to that later.